Overhead boom arm, big purple box from Fanhome. You know what time it is. I'm Ron Burke, Editor-in-Chief for GamingTrend.com. Thanks for joining us for this unboxing of the Iron Man Mark III armor from Fanhome.com. Without further ado, let's open it up and get to assembly. As always, we have 4 pieces to assemble, as well as 4 new comics to check out, so let's crack them open and get to assembly. If there's one particular villain that Tony seems to face over and over, it's the Mandarin. And boy oh boy, can they just not name characters in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But so this particular comic starts off with the return of the Dragon Seed. And this one goes over Fin Fang Foom, somebody that's long been rumored to be part of the next phase of the Marvel MCU. And now that we have the Mandarin kind of returned a bit, sort of, in Shang-Chi, I guess we can see how that possibly evolves. Don't know if they're going to bring back the Mandarin as a character. So we'll see how all that turns out, but you can get a little bit more on the return of the dragons to the Earth, how Iron Man and Rhodey end up tangling with them, and as well as the aforementioned Fin Fang Foom. Just like before, we're going to come back to the assembly bit. So first, we'll head over to what I just mentioned before, which is the Mandarin and also the start of the Rings of Power. So obviously in the Avengers, we didn't have Rings of Power. We instead had the Infinity Stones. And here we see their true origins. In the comics, they are in fact rings that the Mandarin has control of. So a bit of a change, though ultimately it does eventually involve Thanos and his love for Lady Death. And we can see the origins of that here. The Mandarin, of course, being Tony Stark's largest foe that he'd ever faced prior to now, and ultimately one that he has the most trouble defeating. This last piece is Tony's telepresence armor. So we start to get into Tony trying to remote control his weapons. A lot of his problems with Pepper and with injuries that he sustained along the way is just his inability to get back into the suit, whether it's psychological problems from the war in New York, or whether it's his many injuries fighting the Mandarin. He wanted to have a piece of armor that wouldn't put him in harm's way. So the telepresence armor was really one of the first attempts at that, and we get to see some. If you're a Marvel versus Capcom fan, you'll recognize this gun as Tony's ultimate in Marvel vs. Capcom. So some cool tie-ins with some of our other loves, which is video games. So pretty cool stuff. This will be probably the easiest assembly because it's really only the first half. So we'll flip back to here. And it is the assembly of the first part of the left arm elbow joint. I say it's the easiest because it's literally just laying things in place. We're going to take these little plastic washers, put them over the, I say easiest and then I flub it. We're going to drop them over there, just like so. Then we're going to identify which is the upper and the lower, which you can do by length. The lower is the shorter, or I should say the upper is the shorter of the two. So that's going to go like so. And then the lower will simply sit like that. That's the assembly. You're not going to be able to do any more than that because you need the second half, which is the upper assembly and the cover as well as the screws, just like we did on the other arm. Episode 16 is really a fun one because it goes over a lot of really origin stories, as well as getting kind of into the fantastic stuff and what it leads to in terms of Captain America, Captain Marvel, the Kree. There's a lot of origin story action in this one. So kicking things off really talks about the Kree and the Negabomb. So again, with the horrible naming conventions, but bear with me here. So this would be a team up between Captain America, Iron Man, Crystal, Hercules, Black Knight, Cersei, and Goliath. Now Black Knight, Cersei, you probably heard of them if you watched the movie The Eternals. Black Knight was introduced in the post-credit scene, so I mean, it's possible we could end up going down this road, as well as Thor, Wonder Man, Vision, Scarlet Witch, Captain Marvel, Star Fox, not that Star Fox, and Living Lightning, all teaming up to take on the Kree and the Supreme Intelligence. So the Supreme Intelligence we saw in the Captain Marvel movie, so we really don't see her destroyed in that movie, so it's very possible that they could bring some of these elements in. But long story short, the Supreme Intelligence was essentially looking for a way to purify the stagnant Kree race. She was going to destroy 98%. I say she because she was represented that way in the movie, but obviously we don't know what sex the Supreme Intelligence is. But the intention was to destroy 98% of the Kree, and basically whoever was left would repopulate the Kree as some sort of supreme beings. Not generally a great outcome anytime that's ever attempted. So it goes into that, and ultimately in the comics, Black Knight actually destroys the Supreme Intelligence. But once again, it splits into will they, won't they. Tony says, kill the Supreme Intelligence. Captain America says, no. We've seen this play out a few times in the comics. We'll get back to the left elbow joint, which I alluded to last time. Then we get into what they're calling epic stories, the best moments. So I really like this because it's a dichotomy, and it really shows the evolution of Iron Man, as well as some of the other characters that we've seen, not just in the comics, but in the MCU. So this is the introduction of Harry Potter. Did I just say Harry Potter? Wow. Hawkeye, might as well be Harry Potter, Black Widow, Happy Hogan, and Pepper Potts. And we see them kind of in their original form here. Pepper's more of a kind of a pinup character. Happy is an ex-boxer and really kind of down on his luck, if you will. And we see Rhodey and Iron Man in their first suits. And then it kind of folds over here to their more modern takes. So the previous comics were more simple. The modern tales are certainly more of a read. They spend a lot more time on storylines and a lot more effort on trying to make the stories more personal for the characters, even if they still stay supremely in the realm of the fantastic. So without further ado, let's finish assembling that elbow joint. There's no new territory here. So we're taking the same approach that we did the last time we did this on the other side. We drop these washers on, and this square piece here is going to sit really in the only orientation it can, like so. It presses into place so it stays put. And then we're going to merge these two pieces together and lock them in place with the two screws, which that will be the challenging part, the merging the two together part. So close. So I think we'll take this a bit of a different approach this time. We'll put this in place. I'm going to set this on top. And then we're going to surprise this piece like so. Voila. All right, screwdriver. That should be safe to set down now as we drop these last, I think they're GP screws, into place. Again, not too tight. We want these to be able to move, which they do move successfully. No weird seams. One last check. And we're done. Episode 17 is all about War Machine and alternate universes. Hold on to your hats, folks. So War Machine didn't start off like it did in the movie, where it was just, hey, this is this silver piece of armor I've got hanging out over here. Let's just go make use of that. Well, that's not how it happened in the comics. So Tony, once again injured as he often is, ends up building this suit of armor that is absolutely insane, just filled to the brim with weapons. And as a result, he's able to use that to take on a group called the Masters of Silence. So this Masters of Silence, this is the 80s, so naturally we've jumped into the samurai path, and essentially the Masters of Silence are all about honor and want to take on Tony because they consider him to be essentially a warmonger, but then they set their sights on Justin Hammer. So Justin had been purchasing up all of the pieces of Stain Industries once Obadiah Stane was destroyed, and Stain International, and they found him to be completely dishonorable. So he sends his usual pack of robots and unmanned machines after them, and they find that to be completely dishonorable as well. And ultimately they corner him, and they're going to kill him, but decide, out of respect for Tony Stark, who clearly through Iron Man has kind of redeemed himself as just simply a warmonger and a maker of machines and weapons, they instead offer Justin the chance to sell all of his Obadiah Stane's assets to Stark Industries for $1. So he does that to save his own skin, and ultimately Tony takes over all of those items. But again, back to War Machine. Tony had been grievously injured and once again uses his suit as a way to get him out of bed against his doctor's wishes. So we see him take flight as War Machine once again, really just embracing his weapons manufacturer life in suit form. So all this predates Rhodey taking the identity of War Machine. Moving forward, we're again in familiar territory as we're going to be building the left forearm. We'll get back to that. And now we're getting into a little bit of origin story and then a little bit of off the rails pocket dimension craziness. So obviously here we have the formation of the Avengers. This is the original 5. You've got the Wasp, Goliath, Hulk, Iron Man, and Captain America as the original Avengers. And then over here we have their Centennial Tribute. So this is where they end up taking on some godlike enemies such as Ares, and ultimately end up having to sacrifice themselves to end that threat, which is a very common thread in comics, especially in the 80s. But of course, none of that actually happened. They all got pulled into a pocket dimension thanks to Franklin Richards, and they're all safe, of course, and everybody survives, blah, blah, blah. And then we have another pocket dimension action, which is the Ultimates. I mean, you didn't think the Avengers was the only supergroup, right? So the Ultimates is basically another formation of Earth's mightiest heroes, or at least another iteration. So if you're into all that sort of craziness, there's plenty of that to be had. The final bit, again, we're jumping into the 80s and kind of that War Machine thing again. We see Tony's first attempt to really separate away from the Avengers and do his own thing. And to do that, he formed a suit of armor that was only used once, which is, again, not an uncommon thread for Tony. But this is the Arctic armor. This armor was only used for one comic, and ultimately you really only see it in cameos, but it was, Tony forming a secret Arctic base, and this was his armor that he would use at that Arctic base. So kind of an offshoot, and this kind of middle between the 70s style of art and moving into the more serious 80s style of comic art. So let's get back to assembly. We're back to very familiar territory as we assemble the left forearm. So let's take out the left forearm, and we're going to attach the forearm plate just as we did before. That just snaps into place, just like that. And then we're going to take the forearm top, slide it into place. Nope, the right direction, please. And then it is locked in place using a small screw. There we go. First half of the left forearm is now ready. And now we're going to attach the elbow and left forearm piece. So for that, we will lay that like so. And once again, they have easy to spot squares like this. So that just drops into place like so. And we're going to drop 2 screws on top to keep it secure. They have made this pretty much impossible to mess up, which I love. If you're doing this with a younger kid, the nice part is because it's built in such a way that you can't mess it up, it gives them the freedom to accomplish something cool and not worry that they might have messed something up. And that's that. That forearm is complete. And in the next episode, we will finish, or I should say in the next section, we will finish the forearm and elbow. The last comic for this episode is going to finish up the final assembly of this arm, or at least the forearm, and also go over some of the different ways that Tony has formed different organizations other than the ones that you know. So first up, Tony had formed a group called ForceWorks, and that was comprised of Scarlet Witch, Wonder Man, Spider-Woman, and U.S. Agent, some of those characters you've actually seen in various shows that Disney has put together as part of Disney Plus. And we can start to see some formation of Tony as kind of a reluctant hero, but also as more of a leader. So this group was meant to stop the Kree army from invading Earth, and so this group was put together as a group of veterans that could very quickly take on that force. Unfortunately, it all goes very, very badly, and that group suffers catastrophic losses almost immediately. I'm gonna move right past the assembly piece. And that leads to another group that Tony was a major part of, and that's obviously S.H.I.E.L.D. So he's the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., and the group that he was putting together in S.H.I.E.L.D. had a purpose of just trying to find all of the various heroes in the world, all the people with superhero powers, and bringing them all together in one big group. So this is where we start to see some of the offshoots, where you have guys like Luke Cage, and you have Thor Girl, Stature, Rage, Prodigy, She-Hulk, Justice, lots of different characters all brought together, very, very X-Men-like with Professor Xavier's School for Gifted Children. And a lot of those same parallels exist when he builds another group called the Heroes of Tomorrow. And it's basically like a training ground for would-be heroes that Tony ultimately leads. And then, obviously, not everybody's going to want to be in the joining mood, so we end up with the Fugitives. And the Fugitives are basically people that did not want to register, which ultimately led to the Civil War. And as a part of this timeline, you also have Carol Danvers trying to handle that splinter group. So lots and lots of cool organizations that Tony's either formed or been a major part of. And that leads to another major change for Tony, and that is this Gauntlet Armor. So the Gauntlet Armor is really an offshoot of his previous armors, and he's always iterating, but this one coming from mostly the Telepresence armor. So this armor, we get to see a little bit of it in some of the movies, because when you see Tony throw one of his gauntlets or uses his boot to repulse, a lot of that came from this Gauntlet Armor. So this was a major change. Instead of just having repulsors in the palms, he could repulse from the rear, so he could essentially throw his fist at people. And we see a lot of that in this particular armor. So if you're into all of Tony's many suits of armor, here's a pretty unique one. So let's get back to building the Mark III. Once again, we're repeating a little bit as we assemble the other forearm here. So without further ado, let's just get right into it. So we're going to take the left forearm and the forearm protector. That's going to pop right onto the hole built specifically for it. Simple. And then we're going to drop this one screw in to hold it in place. Done. And then we're going to assemble this joint, if you will. So we slide these two together. This is another one of those fiddly bits. There we go. And then we drop in this longer screw, the JP screw, and it can only go in one way, so you can't mess this up. Okay, that joint should move freely, so check that. It does, and it's flat. So we'll set that aside. This part just goes over the top. There's really no special anything to do here other than make sure that the tabs face the right way. They're going to face opposite of these longer pieces. We'll set that aside. And actually we're going to use it right now. We're going to drop it in place here. Just like that. And now it's time to join these pieces together. So, left forearm piece. Oh, I did this wrong. This longer piece should face up, like so. It seems kind of backwards, but trust, that's how it goes. You'll notice that because you can't do it wrong. It literally will not fit together if you do it incorrectly. And if you've done it correctly, all the pieces should snap into place without any seams. Might take you more than one shot to do that though. If, in my case, you were having trouble, I found that flipping this around last time I did this did the trick. That little grommet piece can hold it up. It should be identical, but hey, whatever works, right? And just like that, we're together with no seams. 4 screws later, and this will be done. All right, it's fully assembled. So we're starting to get pieces that are looking pretty final. We're getting closer to having a fully assembled arm, and we're starting to build something that's starting to look like Iron Man. So I'm Ron Burke, Editor-in-Chief for GamingTrend.com, saying stay safe, join us again for the next episode, and we'll see you again very soon.